The Electoral Commission has acknowledged the proclamation by Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma of 27 October 2021 as the date on which the local government elections will be held. The proclamation of the poll date by Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma followed a legally sanctioned consultation process between the Commission and the Minister. The proclamation has a number of implications for the Electoral Commission and the electoral program. To discuss these, we're now joined by IEC Deputy CEO Mashego Sheburi. Mr. Sheburi, very good afternoon. Thank you for speaking to us. How ready are you for the elections if the court rules otherwise?
The Commission is on record having said on a number of occasions that it will stand ready to deliver an elections on the 27th of October. But let me hasten to add that delivering an election in circumstances where we can't guarantee that those elections will be free and fair risks that those elections may be challenged and set aside for a number of reasons. One, because of the impact of COVID-19, the impact of the regulations on political activity, as well as the fact that owing to the third wave, the Commission could not organize a registration weekend to offer opportunities to persons who wanted to register as voters or aspirant candidates to update their details. We are also concerned that the absence of a registration weekend has a very disproportionate impact on young persons because they remain underrepresented on the voters' roll because they've had fewer opportunities to register. But to the extent that the Minister has proclaimed the date of the election as the 27th of October, we have today issued a timetable which indicates the activities and the timelines that those activities must observe in order for us to have an election on the 27th of October. We do not take issue with the proclamation by the Minister. We accept that she is compelled to act in the manner that she has acted because absent a court order, there is no statutory provision excusing her of her responsibility not to proclaim an election.
Now, in your mind, do you have an ideal timing for when the elections should be held, should the Concord agree to postpone them?
The Electoral Commission is on record having issued its report that if elections were to be held in October this year, they are unlikely to be not free and fair. To that extent, the court papers that the Commission will be filing imminently indicate that if an election were to be postponed to take place in February, there is an increased likelihood that those elections will be free and fair in spite of the COVID pandemic. And this is so because on the projections of the majority of people could have been vaccinated in February next year, more than it would be the case in October this year. And that the benefits of vaccination is that they lessen the risk of people getting seriously ill and thereby requiring hospitalization. And similarly, it reduces the risk of death. So the Commission, on that advice, because it does not want an election to be postponed indefinitely or for a long period, the Commission will, again, in consultation with parties, work on a timetable that anticipates an election in February 2022. However, that timetable and election is only possible if the Constitutional Court grants the relief that the Electoral Commission seeks, i.e. a deferral of an election to a date no later than February next year.
Mr. Sheburi, other countries, some on the African continent, have held elections during this COVID season. What makes the South African landscape any different?
Indeed, it is so. The countries on the continent, elsewhere in other jurisdictions, have held elections in the midst of COVID. In our case, we have also held by-elections. While they are not comparable in scale to national elections, we have learned a number of lessons from those by-elections that we've held, over 150 of those. But however, context is very important for each country. In our case, we had regulations that prohibited political activity. And what that means is that rights of political contestants are curtailed. The right to associate, the right of freedom of speech are curtailed. Similarly, the impact is that voters, if they were able to vote, would vote on a basis that they are not informed. And to the extent that alert levels higher than alert level 1 do not facilitate political activity and do not allow for the Electoral Commission to undertake its activities, we had gone to the Electoral Court to ask for the postponement of by-elections. But however, as soon as circumstances permitted, we held those by-elections. In other jurisdictions, we know where they proceeded with elections. There is literature emerging that indicate that after those elections were held and because of electoral activity, there were spikes in rate of infections as well as the resultant mortality. A case in point would be elections in India, the presidential elections in the USA.
Now let's talk about digitizing the elections in the country. Is that on the cards? And if so, how soon are we likely to see that?
Moving with the times and introducing ease of voting by way of employing new technology is always on the agenda of the Electoral Commission. As far back as about 8 years back, the Commission hosted an international conference including represented political parties to start a country discussion on what technology is suited for our circumstances and whether the level of trust, what is needed to create the level of trust to introduce technology. We had attempted last year when we were changing the law to include an opportunity in the scheme of law for an authorized pilot in a representative sample of voting districts to pilot new technology and e-voting. However, the portfolio committee deemed that inclusion to be premature and that it wanted additional discussion. We are engaged with the portfolio committee and also we've taken study tours to Namibia with political parties so that political parties could begin to see technology in action in election. While we could not succeed last year, we have not given up on the need to innovate, and for that reason, we will be engaging with the portfolio committee to see if we can derive a country-specific solution that will help us deal with the challenges attendant to elections in the Republic.
Now, there are 27.5 million registered voters, but voter apathy certainly seems to be an issue. How do you counter this?
It's interesting, Hugo, that in the outcome of elections, the local government participation rate seems to invert the participation rate at national. While the rate of participation at national and provincial is coming down, the rate of participation in local government election is on the increase, and we hope that this trajectory holds. And that could be attributable to a number of factors, chief among those being that local government elections impact the immediate environment in which persons undertake their day-to-day activities. Out of necessity, we are worried with the underrepresentation of young persons on the voters' roll, and therefore our campaign is youthful. We are moving most of our interaction from the traditional platforms to new media on social media and communication that can be accessed from the palm of their hands, because research tells us that's how young persons consume their information. I will be circumspect to use the term apathy, especially as it relates to young persons, because from research that we've undertaken, we have no other conclusion to reach other than this one. Once registered, young persons are more likely to vote than any age cohort. So before we can ascribe terms to them, we must try to see if we have made all opportunities available and have removed barriers to their participation.
Mr. Mashego Sheburi, Deputy CEO, IEC, thank you for your time this afternoon.